and he told me to just go ahead and talk to a recruiter. So I went online and I found the recruiters for all three branches: Army, Navy, and Air Force. Neuropsychological testing, psychodiagnostic testing, administering the test, scoring, interpreting, report writing, all of those things are so different than what a master's level therapist does. And so these are things that I have really wanted to focus on and get better at. Your fellowship time. So one thing that I did not mention is you're paid as an officer once you start doing internship. And so the internship sites through the military are the best paying internship sites in the nation, hands down.
What is up, fam? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Phil Sarpon. This is Phil's Guide to PsyD. This channel is dedicated to all things psychology, wellness, and graduate school. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Ethan Martin. He's actually a student. We are both in the same cohort, and so we actually go to the same program. He will be joining us today to talk about how to become a military psychologist. A lot of graduate students graduate from a PsyD or PhD program from anywhere from $80,000 to $100,000 of student loan debt. And so this is pretty alarming in terms of if you don't have a plan to pay off those student loans, they can be really crippling, especially early on as an early career psychologist. And so this is just one opportunity to check out to see if it might be a really good fit for you. So once again, I'm super excited about this interview. If you all have not already, please like and share the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And if you want more behind the scenes video clips to videos that we haven't released yet, you can always join and become a member to the channel. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump right into the interview. All right, Ethan, how is it going?
Good. How are you doing, Phil?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited for this interview. This is something that I've been looking forward to, and it's crazy because, you know, we're in the same cohort and you're the first person that I'm interviewing on this platform. So congratulations.
Woo-hoo, I made it.
We made it. Oh man. So I'm super excited to get into it. Hopefully, if you want to just introduce yourself to the audience in terms of why you wanted to go into a doctoral program for clinical psychology and kind of what made you interested about, you know, with the military and everything.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So my name is Ethan Martin. I am originally from Fort Myers, Florida. And I was down in Fort Myers, Florida, being a licensed mental health counselor. So I already have a master's in counseling, and I was doing therapy. I worked at the Salvation Army for a little bit over 10 years and was primarily doing substance abuse counseling. After the 10 years, I was considering what kind of would be the next chapter of my life, and considering different career moves, trying to figure out what I could do as far as therapy goes and where I could possibly go from there. And so I started looking into the military. I had had a few patients throughout my time in counseling that were veterans. And one of the things that really stuck out to me with those particular veterans with substance abuse is that a lot of their substance abuse started in the military, while they were in the military. And it for some of them, it actually got them kicked out of the military because they just couldn't manage the substances that they were using. And so I was considering how to do therapy in the military, actually. And so I had another friend who was also considering the military at that time, another counselor, and he told me to just go ahead and talk to a recruiter. So I went online and I found the recruiters for all three branches: Army, Navy, and Air Force. And initially, the Navy was the only recruiter that got back to me. So I had to meet with that recruiter. talk with them. And in the conversation that I had with that recruiter, he said that they don't take master's level clinicians unless it was a master's in social work. And I did not have a master's in social work. I had a master's in counseling. Depending on what state you're from, in Florida, it's called mental health counseling. So I was not able to be a therapist in the military. But during that conversation, he said, hey, there is this scholarship program that you could potentially go back and get your doctorate, and the military would cover the cost of tuition and give you a stipend to live monthly. And then once you're done, you would work for the military and kind of pay back the amount of years that you did while you were in school. And so he said you have to get a doctorate in either clinical psychology or counseling psychology. And the programs have to be APA accredited. So that actually began my journey of looking into going back to school. I never thought that I would go back to school. I thought I was done with my master's. But I had always said in the back of my mind, if somebody would pay for my doctorate, I would probably go back and get my doctorate, just because highest level of credentials possible in the psych world, and I knew I had the capacity to become a doctor. So I was like, all right, well, let me just go ahead and try. So I had to take the GRE again because it had been over 10 years. And took the GRE, applied to several schools, got invited to interview for schools, and then got into a couple schools and ended up choosing the school that we attend. And that's kind of what got me from there up to here. And part of the reason that I wanted to come back to get my doctorate was to work in the military. So to do military psych and to use my my therapy skills serving the people who have served our country.
Wow. That's an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing. There's so many things that I want to kind of sift through that you mentioned in terms of, so you worked for 10 years as a therapist, correct?
Yes. Yep.
And yeah, I get a lot of questions from people who are either in a different field altogether, who are thinking about going to graduate school for clinical psychology. And then I also get people who are master level therapists or clinical social workers who are thinking about going back to get their doctorate.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a apprehensive thing because obviously doctoral programs are long, anywhere from 4 to 6 years, right? And they can be expensive. Yeah. And
very.
It's amazing that for you that that didn't stop you from trying to see if there were different opportunities for yourself to make it work. And now that you've been in graduate school, you're a fourth year PsyD student. What has it been like for you being away from school for so long, but also like now almost nearing the end of the tunnel in terms of getting your doctoral degree?
Yeah. So one of the really big concerns for me, having not been in school for over 10 years, was what is that environment going to be like? And especially because, most, I think, if not all APA accredited clinical psychology programs are like in-person full-time programs. So having a job and working full-time while doing your doctorate, it's not impossible, but it's close to impossible and almost will definitely result in burnout. So, it's not something that I would recommend for anybody to work full-time and do a full-time doctoral program that is clin psych for especially APA accredited. So it was a little bit of an adjustment going from having a career, working full-time, being financially stable, to coming back to being a student where I was not working, no longer have health insurance, no longer have the benefits, no longer have the income, and then just coming back into a program where I haven't written papers in over 10 years. I haven't taken tests. I haven't done all of the things that we do in a doctoral program in a long time. So it took me a while to get adjusted. I'll be honest, I don't know that I'm still fully adjusted to a program, but I'm in it. I'm making good grades, so clearly somebody somewhere thinks that I'm adjusting well, but it still doesn't feel like I'm like in a full-time doctoral program. It just feels like I'm just kind of in this interim portion of my life, and I'm taking classes during this time.
Well, I still think you're an inspiration, because I think it is kind of intimidating to go back to school, to go through that coursework, to go through all of those different things. And so the fact that you're doing it, I think, is an inspiration for people who are trying to figure out if it might be the best option for them. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just appreciate your story in sharing that. And one of the things that I think is really cool, because since you were a therapist and now you're becoming a clinical psychologist, you kind of have this dual perspective of what it's like to be a therapist and what it's like and starting to become a psychologist. Can you
Mhm.
speak to a little bit about maybe some of the differences that you've enjoyed in learning about psychology, learning about, maybe what you're doing in your clinical rotations and some of the differences?
Yeah, I think the main difference that I have seen and kind of observed is with psychological testing. Generally speaking, master's level therapists do not do psychological testing, and there are certain tests that master's level therapists just cannot do. And so for me, some of the things that I have been learning and kind of focusing on, as far as becoming a well-rounded clinical psychologist, and just kind of adding things to my repertoire, is the testing. So neuropsychological testing, psychodiagnostic testing, administering the test, scoring, interpreting, report writing, all of those things are so different than what a master's level therapist does. And so these are things that I have really wanted to focus on and get better at. There's a lot of therapeutic techniques that I have been using for years. And so didn't really want to focus too much on the therapy side of the doctoral program, but more on the testing side. So that was kind of that was something that, coming into this program, that I was very aware of and really interested in focusing on, was gaining more experience and competence in the testing arena, and then also research. That is something that all doctoral programs have. Um, I'm not the biggest fan of research. Part of the reason that I chose a PsyD program is because I am just not I don't want to do research actively for the rest of my life. I will always be a part of research and always be aware of research and all of that stuff. But as far as like actually doing the research and putting it on and orchestrating it and developing it and creating it and all of that stuff, I don't necessarily want to do. That's not been a passion of mine. I like the more clinical, practical side of things. And so I chose a PsyD program specifically for that reason. But I think almost all PsyD programs have research and do have research labs, and you still do a dissertation, and you do all of the research type things, and that's different than master's level. Master's level, of course, they're very aware of research. They may be, depending on where they work, they may be involved in aspects of research, but master's level therapists generally aren't producing the type of research that clinical psychologists do. They're not creating it. They're not developing it. They're not writing all the research articles. Again, this is just a generalization. I mean, there are some that do that out there, but by and large, master's level therapists pretty much just do therapy. And so I wanted to kind of learn all of the other aspects of psychology, testing, research, that I haven't really been doing as a master's level clinician.
That makes me think about, for you, is there a pathway that you see in terms of your career of being a psychologist that just does testing, or maybe even specializing in sort of a neuropsychology realm?
Mhm.
Are those things that you've thought about, or what is your approach to that?
Yeah, good question. So I came into this program really wanting to do testing and kind of learn those skills. I'll be honest, I did not know what neuropsychological testing was when I first entered the program. I had zero idea. Kind of embarrassing for me to admit that, but now that I'm a few years beyond that, I'm okay admitting that it's not as embarrassing for me anymore. Um,
Acceptance.
but yeah, in our first year, I was like, there were people that were like, "Yeah, I'm neuro," and I'm like, "That's really sciency. Like, that's not my cup of tea. Like, I'm not interested in that." I ended up doing in my first practicum, I did my full-time practicum at a psychodiagnostic. So we were just giving out regular like diagnostic assessments, um, and then I did a supplemental practicum at a neuropsychological testing site because I wanted to learn what that was and what that looked like.
Mm.
Well, I ended up falling in love with neuropsychological testing through that site. And that kind of actually changed a little bit of not my career path, but definitely the path in my doctoral program. So I didn't come in thinking that I would do neuro, but now our school has a neuro track and I am on the neuro track and I'm doing neuropsychological testing at my practicum site right now, full time at a VA, and it has been so fun. I never thought that I would be pursuing neuropsychology. I didn't think that I was good at science, but this has been just so intriguing, and I found out that I'm a little bit better at science than I thought I would be. And so, yeah, I've really enjoyed the neuropsych kind of world. As far as career, I don't know that I'll become a neuropsychologist. That's still kind of out there in the kind of future questions that I have about my own career path. But I'm kind of setting myself up to be able to do that by doing the neuro track and taking all the classes that you need to, and having neuropsychological batteries under my belt. So I'm setting myself up to. So if I do choose to do that, I can, and I can approach that with some confidence. Um, so so yeah, I mean, definitely, I was interested in testing. Didn't realize the the scope of how interested in testing I would be, even to the point of neuropsychological testing. And here I am.
That's awesome. I do feel like with neuropsychology, like you don't really, it's hard to explain it to somebody unless they
Yeah.
actually start doing it. Like you can kind of describe it, explain it, but it's like unless you're actually doing it, I think the action part of it is what people fall in love with. And
Yes.
so I think that's just awesome that for you, you already had that foundation in terms of therapy and seeing therapy
Mhm.
clients, but now adding that additional layer of being able to do testing and assessment, I think for me too,
Yeah.
that's been a really just fun experience that I've enjoyed as well.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, so let's say you have a graduate student that is just starting out their first year of graduate school.
Mm.
They're thinking about going into the military, becoming a
Mhm.
military psychologist. What are, I guess, maybe the general guidelines, the general steps that they should take in terms of getting there?
Okay. Yeah. Good question. So there are three different paths to becoming a neuropsychologist, or wow, a military psychologist. Um, so I'll kind of explain the path that I went on. This is the kind of earliest path to becoming a military psychologist. This would be someone who comes in either knowing that they want to be a psychologist in the military, or has an idea that this is a path that they want to take, but isn't maybe quite sure just yet.
Mm.
So that path is probably through what's called the Health Profession Scholarship Program. We shorten it to HPSP. Every single branch of the military, and so almost every single branch of the military has an HPSP scholarship program. That would be Navy, Army, and Air Force. Space Force doesn't have anything yet. Marines is kind of subsumed under the Navy. So if you're working in the Navy as a Navy psychologist, you will most likely be working with Marines. And then I don't believe Coast Guard has an HPSP program. I don't know, not 100% sure about Coast Guard. I'm not sure that they have psychologist positions. I could be completely wrong with that. I just never looked into that. But the kind of three main branches, Navy, Army, and Air Force, they have military psychologists, and they're actively looking for people to become psychologists in the military. So the HPSP program, each of the branches has different scholarship programs. So the Navy has a 3-year scholarship. So generally speaking, what that means is that after or in your first year of your program, assuming that your program is 4 years of academic work, 5th year being internship, like most programs are, that's kind of the general assumption here. In your first year, you would start working with a recruiter, get in touch with a recruiter, and start going through the process of the application process for getting the scholarship. It is intense for all branches. It is not long, but longer than most applications. You'll have to do a physical. You'll have to go through M.H.C. You'll have to do all sorts of things, background checks, all sorts of things, be medically cleared if you have some medical conditions, etc. So your recruiter will kind of go over all of that with you and just kind of discuss what options are available. So you would start that in your first year if you're interested in Navy. Of course, because Navy is 3 years, that's the longest scholarship. It's pretty competitive. And so a lot of people want to do the Navy for that reason, because there's the 3 year is nice. It's nice to have 3 years out of 4 paid for. And so that first year you will have to pay for yourself, loans, whatever. But if you get that Navy scholarship, you get the HPSP, you'll become a commissioned officer in the Navy, and then they'll commission you, and then you are in kind of a reserve unit. I'm not sure exactly what it's called for the Navy. It may be the same thing, but for Army, it's Independent Ready Reserve. And so that's kind of like a special subunit of the reserves, where they know that you're in school. Like this is your kind of your duty station, so to speak. Okay, so that's Navy. If you want to do the Army is a 2-year scholarship. So they actually have a 2-year and a 1-year scholarship available. Okay. I went for the 2-year scholarship. So I was hoping to get 2 years of my program paid for. So I started that in my 2nd year of the program. Again, pretty similar to the Navy. You talk with the recruiter. You have to go, if you have medical issues, become medically cleared, go do physical, background check, all sorts of things. You're literally signing a contract with the Department of Defense if you get this. So it's pretty intense. It's pretty severe, and they want to make sure that you are 100% in, that you're 100% sure that you really want to do this. So that's the Army. And then, so I got that scholarship, and so they're paying for 2 years of my school, plus giving me a monthly stipend, plus paying for books and things that I might need for classes. So you can also elect to do the 1 year. So you would apply for that in your 3rd year of the program. You can do the 1-year scholarship. You can also do that in your 4th year if you wanted to take an extra year of academic work. I've known people who have done that. And then Air Force, not 100% sure on Air Force, but I think they're the same as the Army, where they offer a 2-year and a 1-year scholarship. The Air Force, that was one where I was never able to get in touch with the recruiter. And I didn't pursue it too much just because I was already in touch with an Army recruiter. So, it was not really on the docket for me. But if, for some people, that might be what they want to go for, and I would say go for it. So I believe it's a 2-year, 1-year scholarship, very similar to Navy and Army. You're going to talk with a recruiter, go through the whole process. And if you get the scholarship, you'll become a commissioned officer. You'll get 2 years of your program paid for. They'll pay for books. And so another benefit that is really nice with the HPSP is that when it comes time to internship, you have a better chance than perhaps a civilian of getting an internship. It's not a guarantee, and they make sure that you know that it is not a guarantee. But there's a good chance, the military is already paying for you, and so they probably want you, right? You still have to make sure that you do everything for internship. All the applications are good. You got to make sure your cover letters. Every training site will tell you, every internship training site will tell you, it's not a free in for HPSP. You still have to show up. You have to be professional. You have to do all the things that you need to do, just like any sort of site. Okay. But I think it does look better on applications and CVs and stuff like that for the internship training sites. So that is nice. That's one of the things that's positive. So that's option number 1 of getting into military psych. Option number 2 is if you don't do HPSP, or you're not interested, or you just haven't pursued it, or maybe it's a later thing that you're coming to, you can enter at internship. So all of the military sites are available. They're on the APIC website for internship, and you can actually apply to them. Now, you do have to be cleared by a recruiter. So if you are interested in that, so say you're in your 4th year and you're like, I missed the HPSP boat, but I think I'm still interested in that. You would talk with a recruiter of whatever branch or all 3 branches, and you would start working on the process to become medically cleared and all of that stuff. And then you could come in at internship time, right? If the site says, yeah, we like you, and you're cleared for everything, then they'll commission you, and you'll enter the military and start doing all the internship process, the same as us, like HPSP people, if we get those internship sites. So you would kind of be in the same boat. You just wouldn't have your school paid for and those monthly stipends throughout the time that you're in the program. But anybody can get, as long as they're cleared, medically cleared, background cleared, anybody can get into the military at internship, and as long as they accept you. And then the last option, and I think there is another option to enter at fellowship. I don't know as much about that, so I will kind of put a question mark there. But then and this may be a part of what I'm about to say next. The last option is called direct ascension, and that means that you're already done with your doctoral program. I believe you're already a licensed psychologist at this point. I think you can come in at fellowship before you're licensed, depending on the branch. I'm not 100% sure on that one. But you can come in direct ascension. You're a licensed psychologist. And generally speaking, this is a good one in terms of making money, because most branches give you a sign-on bonus, and the sign-on bonus is a decent sign-on bonus. So if you want to join the military as a already practicing clinical psychologist, that's called direct ascension. You would meet with a recruiter. You would go through the whole process. You'd have to, go through the physical and all of those things, background checks, etc. And then you could come on. They would commission you, and you would, go through the basic trainings and all of those things, and then you would become a military psychologist, and they call that direct ascension. So those are the 3 options of becoming a military psychologist.
Wow. That was an excellent, thorough, thank you for taking us through that. I learned so much as you were sharing that. So for you, once you finish your internship and your postdoc, how many years do you have to put into the military
Mhm.
until, yeah, like,
Yeah. So again, each branch is a little bit different, and it depends on your kind of contract, what your payback time would be. So for me, it's 3 years of payback for my scholarship. So even though my scholarship is only 2 years, the Army says you have to give 3 years back. It does not, that does not include your internship time. That counts as active duty, but that doesn't count as payback time. So the year of internship doesn't count as payback. I also believe that your year of postdoctoral residency does not count as payback time.
interesting.
So
Okay.
that's yeah. So technically around 5 years for me. Um,
Got it.
Navy, I know their payback time is 3 years. I'm not sure if internship counts or if their postdoc
Mm,
residency counts as that 3 years. And same with Air Force. I think Air Force payback is 3 years. Again, unsure of what that looks like as far as internship and postdoc residency. Um, it could be. It could be exactly the 3 years. You do your year of internship, do your year of postdoc, and
yeah,
then only 1 year as a practicing clinician, practicing military psychologist. To me, that doesn't really make a lot of sense for the military to do it that way
sure.
because that's 1 year of independent practice that they get you. Um,
Right.
it does make more sense to me the way the Army does it with um, we're paying for your school. We want you for 3 years of independent work, um,
Hmm.
so that you can kind of pay your dues for us
Hmm.
paying for your school. Like that makes sense to me from a business perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a I'm so glad that we're talking about this because I think the financial burden of graduate school, it really weighs heavily on students, especially in our time where inflation is increasing.
Mhm.
Student loans, I mean, there's just a lot of different things that are moving parts for us in graduating, and especially, talking to early career psychologists, when you graduate, you want to work as much as you can to kind of pay off those student loans back,
Yeah.
but then you can easily get into a, a, a type of format where you're working 40, 50, more than 50 hours a week,
Mhm.
just in trying to pay back your dues and get burned out so quickly.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
of course, that's not what you want as an early career psychologist when you have your whole career ahead of you. And
Yeah.
so I think what is great about the military is that it provides an opportunity for students, especially if they're interested in working with veterans or working in the military, that they can have that opportunity to have a little bit of their schooling paid off of.
Mm.
And I'm sure there's a huge financial burden that's off their back that they can just really focus on their clients and their patients and their work life balance. And so I just think it's such an awesome opportunity. I'm wondering for you, where do you see yourself maybe even after you pay back your time in the military? Do you see yourself still working with veterans or potentially seeing what other opportunities come up for you?
Yeah, I think I'm just kind of open at this point, right? Like once my contract is through, I'm open. If I'm just absolutely loving it, like I would probably renew my contract. There is so again, this is just for the Army. Um, when it comes to actually like doing a fellowship, so if I wanted to become a neuropsychologist, for instance, I would not be able to do my fellowship right after internship. So for neuropsych, you have to do a 2 year fellowship to become a neuropsychologist. I wouldn't be able to do that immediately after internship. So I would have to do my postdoc residency, become licensed, fulfill my 3 year contract, and then so if I wanted to do a fellowship, then that's the time to do the fellowship. This is my understanding. Um, and it's not a bad it's not it seems like it's kind of like later, but it's not a bad gig because your your fellowship time. So one thing that I did not mention is you're paid as an officer once you start
Mm,
doing internship. And so the internship sites through the military are the best paying internship sites in the nation, hands down.
Wow.
You're paid as an officer, so you're not getting just $30,000 or whatever the average is for internship sites in the United States. You're actually getting paid a decent amount of money, living wages, more than living wages. And so, so you're getting paid as an officer throughout internship and your postdoc residency, and then of course as you are an independent psychologist, and then you fulfill your contract, right? You can choose to do a fellowship. So Army has offers for neuropsych fellowship, forensic, health psychology. Those are the ones I know for sure off the top of my head. I think there might be like a few different more, like maybe child and adolescent. There might be some sort of maybe operational psychology too, potentially.
Oh, wow.
I can't remember all of the different things, but Army has a decent amount of fellowship opportunities, right? And so I could choose, if I wanted to become a neuropsychologist, I could choose after my 3 years of payback to say, I'm interested in doing fellowship. I'm sure there's some sort of application process for that. And then there's probably another contract that I would sign in order to do that. So I would do 2 years of fellowship as a neuropsychologist. But I would be getting paid as an officer. Okay. So neuropsychologists now, when they do fellowship, they're not getting paid barely living wages, and so that's 2 years that they're barely getting paid this, that they have to commit to this. In the Army, I would be getting paid as an officer at this level. So I'm doing 2 years of fellowship, getting paid as an officer. To me, that's not a bad gig, right? And so again, don't know what the payback would be because I haven't researched that. But there is that opportunity to do fellowship as after your first kind of contract time is over with. There's also opportunities to just be a generalist psychologist in the military and redo contract. They have great retention bonuses in the military because they want to keep you. They trained you, they want to keep you. And so they have great retention bonuses. So I could elect to just be like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do a fellowship, but I do want to stay in as a psychologist. Maybe I want to be stationed in Japan. So there's a job opening there. So I'm just going to stay in, renew my contract, try to go over to Japan and be a clinical psychologist at a base there. Right. So I'm open to what is next. I could not have had a great experience in the military, and I could just be like, I'm kind of done with my military. I did my payback time. So now I just want to be, work in a civilian site. I could be a civilian contractor with the military where I'm no longer, I'm no longer a part of the military, but there's a lot of psychologists that are civilian contracts through the military. So that could be an option, right? So I'm just kind of open. So all that to say, I'm open to what is next after this.
I think that's awesome. I think that's a great space to be in because you'll be flexible with whatever comes your way. And as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about, for students who are maybe just first starting out their graduate program, they're thinking about the military, but maybe there's some apprehension, some nervousness and anxiety about going into it and really committing. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit on, like going through that process, maybe what advice do you have for students? And also, are you going to be required to do like a fitness test or like basic training? Are there certain age limits? Like, I'm just curious about maybe certain things that people will have to face in terms of some obstacles in getting there.
Sure. Yeah. There are age limits. And so depending on which branch you're in is dependent on the age limit. So for instance, I think with the Navy, I was still within the age limit, but when it came to Army, I had to sign what was called an age waiver. So I was over the age limit, but because I'm interested in being a medical officer, I had to get an age waiver done. Apparently it was not a problem. They accepted me, and it's fine. I'm about to turn 40 here soon. So for those of you who might be a little bit later in life, like I would say if that's your interest, still pursue it. Talk about an age waiver with your recruiter. There are certain medical things that can preclude you from getting into the military. I don't know exactly what those are. There is a list of medical things on the DoD website. However, I do think that for some things they can waive some of those medical things. So you would get a medical waiver. And again, this is something that you discuss with your medical recruiter. I don't know what that whole process is like. So I don't know what things they could waive and what things they couldn't waive. But that is a conversation to have with your recruiter. That's something to ask them and talk to them about and say, hey, I have this, I have that. They also want a pretty extensive background on medical things that you have gone through, like past surgeries, all of that stuff. And you have to be honest about that stuff because they will find it. And they can potentially kick you out if you lie about certain medical things or if you lie about medical things. So you want to be honest about all of the past history. Again, this is a conversation that you would have with your medical recruiter. So that's that as far as medical and age. They of course have weight restrictions too. So if you're a little bit on the heavier side, you do have to fall within a weight bracket for your height. And that's also you can find that just by Googling what are the height weight standards for whatever branch of the military you're interested in. And so again, I think you can still get started with the application process if you're on the heavier side, but you will want to get down within your weight, I think probably by time of commissioning, if not at least by the time you start basic training. So you do need to get down into your weight class then. There is a physical fitness test, and again, depending on branch, you can find out what that is per branch. So I think it's a little bit, I think they're all trying to become standardized, but I think it's different for each branch. And so you can kind of Google that. I may have a link for that. Phil, I don't know if you can put that in the YouTube thing, but I think I have a link for that I can send you, at least the Army.
Okay.
And so people can find out like what is the test, and it even has you. The Army has a nice little on their website. It has like little exercises that you can do to prepare yourself for those tests too. So like what kind of workouts can you do to help prepare for those types of tests? And so those are the kind of like just practical things to do. And as far as like any sort of trepidation or fear about pursuing the military, I get that. It's a commitment, right? And it's a commitment that the military takes very seriously. And then so should you, right? If that's your choice, like you should really take it seriously. This should be something that you want to do. It doesn't mean that you're going to absolutely love it, but you generally don't know that until you're there anyways. In any situation, you might think that this is the perfect thing for you, and then you get there and you hate it. You might be questioning it. You might have doubts, and then you absolutely love it. So, but I would say at least pursue it, right? Talk to a recruiter. Recruiters their job is to get you in, right? So that's their job. And they will do what they can, generally speaking, to get you in. Depending on the recruiter, sometimes you have to be a little bit more tenacious and reach out to them and kind of get their attention. But that just depends on the recruiter. I had some really, really good recruiters working with me, and they were constantly in contact with me. I have found the Army recruiter up here has been incredibly helpful and very responsive. So I've really appreciated their recruiting station here. I really can't speak highly enough for what they've done and how they've worked with me. So that does depend though. Just depends on branch and the personality of the recruiter. But yeah, I'd say as far as like fear and any sort of fear or trepidation, if you're just a little bit interested, just talk to a recruiter, and see what they say and get a feel for what they're saying, and give them some of your background information and see if that would be a good fit. A lot of times you can tell if it would be a good fit. I walked away from the recruiting station every time just feeling like, man, I can't wait to do this. So it was that kind of feeling that was like, that's what I left with. If you leave a recruiting station and you're like, I don't know, that sounds horrible, probably don't do it. Look somewhere else.
I think that's great advice. And I love it because what I'm hearing you say is that, social support really throughout this process is really important. If you can find a recruiter who can kind of mentor you through the steps,
Yep.
you can bounce ideas off of them, ask them different questions.
Yes.
It seems to be really helpful. And I think that is probably universal just in terms of just graduate school in general. Like I feel like for me, having mentors who are rooting for me, who I can go to, who I can ask different questions about just navigating this space in general is just so helpful. And so for students who are just starting out, I think that's typically like my number one piece of advice is just to try and find some support, whether in your cohort or upperclassmen or just either faculty members or teachers who can kind of be there in your corner, kind of cheerleading you on. Yeah. I'm wondering, for you, is there any other general advice that you would give students in terms of just getting through graduate school and nearing the end of their graduate school career?
Yeah. Stick with it, there will be very difficult times. There will also be very rewarding and fun times. But a lot of that, it just requires some perseverance and some tenacity. Yeah. And depending on your personality, fun, definitely self-care is absolutely necessary. And self-care can look differently for everybody, but certainly start doing whatever you can in your first semester. Start establishing those habits and those routines of self-care that will get you through, because your first year can be difficult, but in my experience is not as difficult as the other years. So start establishing routines and healthy self-care activities in those times. And I think to echo what you're saying, Phil, is find mentors, whether that's faculty, whether that's students that are in cohorts above you, whether that's somebody in the career field that you're trying to enter or be a part of. All of that, like, have that social support, and then find other avenues of social support. Social support is incredibly necessary. Whether that's a pickleball club or playing volleyball. In my case, I love playing volleyball, or church, or any sort of like social activity where you're going to be able to have some support that's outside of your academic program is also going to be really beneficial. You don't always have to think about school. And I think that that's a big thing that's hard for graduate students to deal with, especially full-time graduate students, because there's constantly deadlines, milestones, homework, papers looming. But it's actually healthier if you don't think about those things all the time. So try to find some outside activities that are not academic, where you can find that support as well.
I think it's a great segue. One of the questions that I ask all my guests is, in terms of wellness for either the body, the mind, the spirit, in terms of giving back to ourselves in this profession, we're constantly giving to our patients and we're pouring into our schoolwork and our social life. But, what are some of the ways for you that you give back to yourself, that you take care of your soul, and so that you can pour out, you can continue to pour out to others?
Yeah, really good. Just like I said, volleyball, I try to play volleyball as often as possible. And I have just recently kind of picked up pickleball. I loved playing tennis, but as I'm getting older, tennis is a little bit more difficult. And so some friends have started playing pickleball. And so I've kind of started adopting that and been playing that a little bit more. I try to stay active. That's generally my one of my self-care activities to try to give back. Just ran my first 5K a couple weeks ago. Of course, being active is necessary for the military, so it's also in prep for military. But I do try to stay active and have times of active work. And then I would also say for me, church is a really good place to have some support and to kind of be poured into and fed and getting that kind of community. Friends, one of my biggest values in life is fun. And so game nights, trying to hang out with people from cohorts, our cohort, people from church, people from wherever. I try to have fun and make that a huge priority in my career, because I know that if I'm not having fun in school, then I'm going to lose my motivation. I'm just going to not have that, and it's not going to work well for me, and I'm going to get burnt out really quickly. So those are some of the actually practical activities. I think depending on personality and your values, I think you can kind of create self-care activities that fit your personality and your values. But those are the things that I do that fit my personality and values.
That's awesome. I was listening to something the other day that was talking about the power of laughter and how when people, go to work, they were just doing a research study that showed that the people who laugh a lot at their workspace are actually very productive in their work. They're able to have a lot of mental energy into their work. And so you talking about just having fun throughout this process, I know it's incredibly stressful at times, but being able to have fun and laugh throughout the process and be with people, I think is such a huge blessing. And it kind of helps you to carry a little bit of that weight in terms of all of the things that come with school. So
yes, I agree.
Well, Ethan, this was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, going in such detail with how to go into the military for people, and just for your time here.
There's, I just want to also say there's another link, hopefully, that you got, Phil, and that is it's a link to an article that was written by a Navy psychologist, and it is how much you make, the salaries. Now, this I think was posted in 2019, and so of course the salaries have increased since then. But this is a general idea of what you can make as a military psychologist, and it is fantastic information. So if anybody's interested, like at least on the salary side of things, that link is a really good link as well.
Yes, I think it's definitely really important for people to know how competitive the salary is, and not only that, but it's like for me, I did my clinical rotation in the VA. It was my last clinical rotation, and I loved it. I loved working with the veterans. I loved going to the VA hospital, and so I think it's not just a competitive salary, but it's also a really great place to work. And to be supervised by. And so it's literally the best of both worlds when it comes down to it. So yes, agreed. We'll definitely make sure to put down that link in the show notes. But once again, Ethan, thank you so much. I am looking forward to seeing where you go in terms of your future aspirations and becoming a psychologist, neuropsychologist, military psychologist, all of the above. Time will tell. So.
Time will tell. Sky's the limit. Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me, Phil. It's been a great sharing my story and all of the opportunities that the military provides. And thank you for opening up this opportunity for us to have this conversation and discourse about the amazing opportunities that we have with the military. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. It was great having you.